Morning everyone, today is a great day. I get to install my 200 amp hour lithium batteries from Renogy. I've got two of them, they're big, they're shiny, they're powerful. I'm excited. So the techniques I'm going to show you on this video are the same techniques that you would use for any type of deep cycle battery that you're going to fit in your van. But if you don't want to watch me, you could always read about it in the chapter in Tips, Installations and Tricks within the handbook, page 207 in the hard copy. So the first thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to read the manual for these batteries. It doesn't matter which batteries they are, you may have different instructions, but predominantly they're going to tell you that you should inspect the battery to make sure that it isn't damaged when it was arrived or when you bought it or whatever, you haven't dropped it. So there's no splits in the casing, there's nothing leaking out, and it's nice and secure and safe, right? So check that with both your batteries. The second thing I like to do is I put a bit of masking tape over the terminals so that you can't drop anything across the terminals as you're moving things around. Maybe you drop your ruler, or maybe your chains, don't be wearing any chains, or metal watches, rings, etc., because you do not want to short out these two terminals because it's going to hurt. So there are other things in this book about this particular model and the lithium batteries being shipped in a hibernation state. I think other batteries you need to press a button or plug something in to switch them on. So make sure you're familiar with the installation instructions within the handbook for the product that you have. The second thing is you probably worked out what size that you want because you've worked out how much load you're going to get because you've done a load audit and yada yada yada. So you know why you've got these size batteries. The other thing you need to think about is, firstly, where are they going to fit? And they have to fit somewhere that's nice and secure and safe. You do not want this thing flying around your van if you happen to have an accident or you roll your van, because A, it's a bad day, but B, this is a really big bulky thing that's going to break the back of your head. And thirdly, you do not want any of these contacts to fall onto something metal in the van as you roll the van over or you have a big accident, because that will cause sparking and a fire. So not only have you crashed your car, banged your head, you now set yourself on fire. So we need to secure these properly. Let's have a look how we're going to do that. As you can see, the battery fits in here. I put some spacers around the foot of the battery so that it can't slide either way. And I'm going to be using these half-ton ratchet straps, got two of them, to secure it on eye bolts onto the floor and to the frame so that it doesn't move. So if in the awful event we have an accident and we roll over, the shelf that sits on top has got a wooden back, and so there should be no chance of the contacts here being shorted out, and so that will take at least one problem away from a really bad day. So here we are back in the workshop, only because it's easier for me to show you how to connect the batteries up. You put your battery into a secure location in your van and it's nice and tight and bolted in place. You also need to have your fuses and your battery isolators installed as well. In previous programs I installed it on a panel here, so it might be worthwhile just to check back on that program and see how it was all put together. It is now time to wire up your battery, and I'm going to wire two batteries up in parallel. And as you can see from the diagram, I'm going to have a positive supplying the first battery, but my negative is coming off the second battery, and that helps with balancing out. In this brand of battery, I can have 8 in parallel, so that's quite a large battery bank, but I can't put them in series. So if you want a different size battery bank to 12 volts, if you want 24 or 36 or even 48 or 60 volts, and you want to connect batteries up in series, you need to check with the manufacturers that they can actually connect. AGM and gels aren't such a problem. They're okay. You can connect quite a lot of them in series and quite a lot of them in parallel, and they don't really mind. Lithiums, however, are a completely different story, and so that's where you need the manufacturer's advice to help you size the battery bank that you want to build. Right, so first thing first, all the batteries are in place, nicely secured, and now we need to measure up. So I now know that I need a cable running from my positive terminal to my positive fuse end, and I know the distance, so I'm now going to make this with this cable. So let's have a look at how we make a crimp. I've got quite a few cables to make, so it's worthwhile me investing in all of these hydraulic crimps. If you've only got one cable to make, or two cables to get for your battery, then it might be more economic for you to buy those pre-made. Just be careful that you get the right thickness cable that's advertised. There are some suppliers out there who will tell you one thing, but actually when you look at the cable, it's not as thick as it should be. So what do we need to make our battery cables? Firstly, we need some heavy duty cable, and we're going to need a cable lug, and we should use a steel rule so that we can measure the length of cable that we need, but also how much of the plastic we're going to need to remove to fit inside the lug. We'll need a sharp knife, of course, to remove this plastic. Once we've removed the plastic and we fit the terminal, we need this hydraulic crimp to crush this terminal onto this cable. And when we've done that, we will fit some heat shrink around the terminal and the cable, so it is A, waterproof, but B, it gives recognition to anyone who's looking at what the polarity is of this cable. So are we connecting it to the positive, which will be red, or are we connecting it to the negative, which will be black? Heat shrink needs a heat source to make it smaller. If you have a heat gun, well and good, you just heat the heat gun and it will shrink onto the terminal and the cable. Another approach is to use a naked flame from, say, a lighter or from a blowtorch. I've not been very successful with those because they either hurt my fingers or I set fire to the plastic, in which case it's pointless. But there is a secret tool in the armory. You might need to get permission, or you might need to ask for forgiveness. But a hairdryer can work just as well as a good heat gun. First things first, we need to work out the depth of the lug here. So there's a gap here you can see at the end of it, which is to show you that the cable has already reached the end, and it's, in this case, 3/4 of an inch, probably a good 17 millimeters. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the rubber cover off the cable here, measuring about 17 meters, and we use a very sharp knife. I'm using a Stanley blade. And I'm just going to slowly cut in. When you've cut through the plastic, you'll suddenly feel there's a little grinding as the knife touches the copper of the cable. And that's when you want to stop cutting, because you don't want to cut or score the cable underneath. So just take your time, be very careful, and just slowly work your way around. And it's just a very simple technique, cutting. Be careful not to cut your fingers with this very sharp knife, because A, it hurts, and B, it'll keep it's the same finger you'll keep cutting over the next few days as you make more and more cables. So, and when you cut all the way around, sometimes you can just try and pull this piece off. Sometimes it doesn't come off at all because you haven't got it completely cleared. Now what I tend to do is cut along the length of the wire, like that, and that helps you peel off the end, nice and gentle. If it's sprayed like this, don't worry, copper wires are generally twisted in a clockwise direction, so you can just grab the ends and tighten it up like that. And then this lug, same thing, with a clockwise motion, put it in, clockwise motion, Make sure you get all the cables in. And that fits nice and easy. And now you can see the cable is sitting at the end here, which tells me that we're in all the way that it should be doing. So we're crimping this until the jaws close shut. And there we go. So now we've got our link, and we're going to connect it to the battery switch, the common terminal of the battery, and this battery fuse. If you've never taken an A&L fuse off, quite simply the plastic cover comes off, it just clips on, and there are two nuts. These nuts are 14mm. If you take the nut off or loosen it, you'll have a split washer, and a split washer is an anti-vibration technique. So in theory, and it does work actually, is that this prevents this nut becoming loose because of vibrations. So it's better than a lock nut. And you then have a washer, and the fuse can come out. Now if you notice, the fuse has an odd shape this way and an odd shape that way, so you can basically fit them without having to undo all these nuts. So they just slip in and come out. You need to make sure they fit between the two washers here, this one and this one, but that's straightforward. We'll take that out to one side. The next thing is this switch. So let's take the switch apart. Basically it's held in place by 4 nuts and long bolts. Take the bolts out, and underneath you have the you have a grey cover. Take the cover off and you'll see 3 terminals. This is a 3-terminal switch, so it's allowing me to switch from a common rail to battery 1, battery 2, or both. I'm going to use this to go from common rail to the bus bar or the inverter charger, or both. Now these nuts are also 14mm. Take them off, and you have a nut and you have a split washer. Same principle again. That's to prevent these nuts coming loose. So I just need to make sure which I'm doing. This one, this one, this one. Okay, so I'm going to take off this one for the buzz bar. The sides slide out. Okay, I'm making sure I get the right one. So this now is going to fit between here and here. So turn it round. That goes into there like that. We put the split washer on it and we tighten up the nut. 14mm. I find these combo spanners are quite good. So now we're in a position to start connecting our batteries. Keep the fuse out, isolator switched off. Put your goggles on. No jewelry, no chains. Make sure nothing can fall onto the battery terminals. And this is really important because you're in the back of the van, maybe, if you haven't built your module and you just shoved your batteries in a garage or under the bed or whatever. It's really easy to forget that spanners and screwdrivers could just fall into the battery bay, and bang, you get a short, a bang, whatever. Not great. So not only could it hurt you, it could also damage the batteries, which is just as bad. Right, let's start then. First thing first, I get to connect my cable, battery cable, to the end of the fuse panel. Put the cable in here and we bring it to our battery terminals. And as you can see, because I've been working away and doing various things, the terminals are covered in a bit of masking tape just to prevent any inadvertent accident by me touching the terminals. So we take them off and you can see that we have some nice shiny terminals, and the nut is going to go here. So I'm going to join these two batteries together. So I just want to make sure that they are very similar in voltage, so that when we combine them, the battery management systems and the battery balancing doesn't have too much work to do. So checking battery number 1, 13.7, and checking battery number 2, 13.7. They're closely matched, so I'm happy with that. So they're good to go. I'm going to connect this cable that runs from the main fuse. I'm going to put on the terminal cover here just to make it a little bit safer, and then that secures on there. We've now got the longer threaded bolts for the battery terminal. So I'm going to start in reverse order. This is the battery that we're connecting to, so let's connect this cable up first, making sure that the live terminal now does not touch anything conductive. So spanners, the metal casing of your vehicle, the negative terminal of another battery, all things that you need to keep this away from. This cable with this cable. I'm just going to tie them this way for the moment. This is not how they will be in the real vehicle. This is where it becomes a little bit more challenging. We need to make sure that this terminal does not touch or get live on here. So I'm going to hold it here, and we're just going to go straight off this battery. I'm going to use a long bolt just for now, because I'm going to put other cables on it. Okay, and again, this is going to have two cables running off it. So I just want to make sure the end of this cable is clear. Same process again. And then finally, we connect it to our earth point. So now we've connected the earth up. Let's just confirm we have a battery supply. (13.8 volts). So we know that we now have connectivity between all the two batteries and these two points. So now I'm just going to add my fuse. So now I make sure I fit between those two washers there, and I fit between these two washers in here. And now we can just tighten these up. And now the moment of truth. So there you have it, two batteries installed. Okay, this is on the bench and you're going to put yours in your van. But remember, find a nice secure place to put them in the van out of the way. Make sure they're strapped down. Make sure they can't fall out or fly around if you have to roll your vehicle or whatever. Then make sure you have an isolator and a fuse connected and an earth point. Work out where they are. Put them in. Then either buy cables or make your own cables to connect the positives of the battery through, and then the negatives back to here. Install the fuse, switch on the battery, checking connectivity with your multimeter as you go along. Don't forget to wear goggles, because any sparks, any short outs, any mistakes, and you're going to get sparks flying. You don't want those sparks in your eye, you don't want arc eye either. So wear your goggles, be safe, enjoy the process. We're going to be installing our Renogy One next to monitor these batteries, and then after that we will start to install the charging processes and also the services that will run off it. So make sure you subscribe so you can see how we get on and check back how things pan out for me. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, make sure you come back and see how we get on, and all I can say is I'm Graham, this is Mowgli Adventures, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.